My mom and sister planned to use my $57,000 and cut me out, so I turned my sister's 40th birthday into the night everything collapsed. I'm Layla Morgan, 36 years old, living in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. On Christmas Eve, while everyone in the neighborhood was busy hanging lights and preparing cozy dinners, I was carefully finishing the last strands of LED lights for the family party I had painstakingly arranged. The cold wind slapped my face as I tried to open the window overlooking the newly renovated garden. Soft Christmas music floated from the radio and the kitchen counter. But what I heard next froze everything around me. My sister Vanessa's voice, sharp as a knife, cut through the cracked open door. "That girl Ela, if Mom doesn't make her cover the entire renovation cost this time, it would be such a waste. After that, just cut her off for good. Keeping someone like her in the family is beyond embarrassing." My mother, Deborah, let out a soft sigh before responding in a low voice. "Don't worry, Vanessa. Everything has already been arranged. The entire estate, the properties, the house, all of it will go to you. This house, I only see it as a trap to lure her in willingly." I stood frozen in the icy air, my hands tightening around the string of lights, knuckles turning white. Years of dedication, sleepless nights designing, choosing every brick, every piece of wood, and this was how they laughed behind my back. I heard Vanessa sneer with disdain. "Everyone in this neighborhood knows she's just a loser on construction sites, wears that hard hat all day long. Who would ever want her? Let her die alone. She's such a fool." Deborah chuckled. "She thinks hanging a few lights and cooking a meal is enough to earn this family's love." Their laughter echoed through the dark, mingling with the clinking of wine glasses, and I just stood there frozen as if someone had landed a punch straight into my stomach. No one realized I was right there hearing every word. They called me a failure, a burden, a disposable tool. Once they drained every drop of effort and money from me, the kitchen I had just renovated, the light fixtures I installed myself, all of it warped and hollow under the very lights I had so patiently hung. To them, I was nothing more than an invisible laborer. I couldn't help but wonder how foolish I had been all these years to believe in family bonds. 36 years only to hear such venomous words behind a half-closed door. They said I was lonely. Maybe they were right. I was alone in the house I built among people who shared my blood. The wind howled, the lights I had hung flickered as if matching my frantic breathing. Everything I thought was solid and unshakable crumbled in a few cruel sentences. I didn't step inside. I didn't confront them. I simply closed the window slowly as if I was shutting the door on an entire chapter of my life. But instead of letting the pain drown me, something inside me began to freeze over. I was no longer the compliant Layla, the one running around covering their expenses. I knew this was the moment I had to rise, not to confront them right away, but to prepare for a battle they would never see coming. I wiped the sawdust from my hands, took 3 deep breaths, and returned to the kitchen, calmly glazing the last batch of cookies baking golden in the oven. Outwardly, I was still the obedient Ela, the beautiful daughter, the devoted hostess. But inside, a plan was already forming, cold, precise, like the blueprints they had always mocked. I spent the rest of that evening like a shadow, moving quietly through the house where every brick, every wall now reeked of betrayal. I didn't cry. Maybe because the last of my tears had long dried up. I just hadn't realized it yet. Everything I had done, from extravagant family vacations in Aspen to imported furniture my mother demanded, were nothing more than offerings I gave in hopes of being loved. And now all I received in return were cheap insults behind closed doors, 36 years as the perfect daughter. And in the end, I was just a wallet they emptied without a second thought. I sat silently in the living room, the glow from the Christmas tree reflecting off the glass, casting a cold, hollow light onto the ceiling. Looking deep into that light, I knew I couldn't go on living like a ghost in my own house. But I wouldn't let anger tear down what I had built. They wanted to see me as a loser. Fine. I would show them that my silence all this time wasn't weakness. It was the patience of a builder calculating the foundation. I started paying closer attention to the things I had ignored before. My mother, Deborah, had become unusually tense lately, especially when I walked into the kitchen while she was texting. She would quickly flip her phone face down, forcing a tight smile that couldn't quite hide the irritation in her voice. "Ela, you're tracking dirt all over the floor again. That smell of wood is everywhere." In the past, I would have lowered my head and apologized, but now I simply smiled, said nothing, and quietly noted every strange little sign. My suspicions grew stronger when I noticed an unfamiliar gray Mercedes often parked a few blocks from my house in the afternoons when I wasn't home. No one in the family mentioned it, and while I usually had no desire to dig into private matters, this time something felt undeniably wrong. One night after everyone had gone to bed, I entered my mother's office. She had never set a password on her computer before, but now a strange code appeared. It wasn't until my third attempt, my own birth date, that I managed to unlock it. The irony was suffocating. Inside her inbox, I found email exchanges spanning over 3 years with an unfamiliar name, Charles Bentley. At first, I assumed he was just a business associate, but the more I read the affectionate messages, the photos of them at restaurants traveling together, I understood immediately. Charles wasn't a stranger at all. He was my father's best friend from college, now his financial partner in the company. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my skin. My mother had been having an affair. Not only betraying my father, but using the money I contributed to family vacations to fund her lavish outings with Charles. They went together to Napa Valley, Seattle, to 5-star hotels I never even dreamed of stepping into. What stung more was realizing those expenses came from the very funds I believed were for family memories. Each tiny detail came together like broken shards of a larger, sinister picture, and me, who thought I was holding the foundation of this family together, was nothing more than a puppet in their scheme. I couldn't barge in and confront them like I used to when catching contractors cheating on job sites. I needed time. I needed irrefutable evidence. That night, I quietly installed recording devices in the living room, kitchen, and even my mother's office. I placed a hidden camera behind my father's favorite painting, a photo of the Grand Canyon from when he and Mom were still a happy couple. I didn't know when I had crossed the line of ethics, but I knew I was fighting for myself, for the hard work and dignity they had dismissed so easily. Standing in my backyard workshop, the warm yellow light illuminating the fine dust swirling in the air, I made a silent vow. I would never let anyone take what was rightfully mine again. And when the time came, they would feel the sting of betrayal exposed right on the stage they built to humiliate me. The days that followed played out like a twisted theater where I was the lead actor, pretending to be an extra in my own life. I continued doing what they expected of me, baking cookies, watering the plants, chatting with neighbors who barely noticed if I existed. Inside, I quietly observed, noting every word, every glance, every secret message my mother tried to hide behind her gracious smile. The recording devices started capturing conversations and plans more vile than I could have imagined. My mother, Deborah, and Vanessa weren't just plotting to strip me of everything I had built. They were scheming with Charles to transfer part of the family estate to Vanessa right after her 40th birthday, just 6 weeks away. I recorded every conversation, every message. There were nights I stayed up until dawn, replaying those recordings, each sentence slicing deeper into what little patience I had left. They laughed at how naive I was, unaware that the renovation contract, despite me footing the bill, was still under my parents' names. I had signed it without reading the fine print, believing it was a gesture of filial duty. Now I was just an unpaid investor with no paperwork to protect me against their calculated plan. I couldn't act on emotions. I needed to plan just like I prepared bidding documents for major construction projects. I began compiling a detailed spreadsheet. Every material invoice, every payment to contractors, design fees, permit applications, even the decorations I crafted myself. The total, $57,450. Every number hit me like a punch to the gut of my former naivety. A direct confrontation would only make me look unhinged. I had to let them crumble under their own scheme. I chose Vanessa's birthday, her favorite stage to showcase herself, as the day of reckoning. I meticulously prepared everything as if I were hosting a grand party for her. But every detail was staged for one purpose only, to expose them all, without exception. I used the excuse of needing a family financial discussion under the guise of estate planning during her party, feigning concern over our parents' financial situation. They agreed without hesitation, completely oblivious. I bought a formal suit, played the obedient daughter one last time. I printed all the evidence in multiple copies, uploaded the recordings onto a brand new tablet, carefully categorizing everything. Financial, property, infidelity. I even hired my own attorney just in case. He wouldn't attend the party, but I needed the legal shield once the truth exploded. On some nights I sat alone in the workshop, staring at the long dining table I'd crafted from solid cherry wood, the very table they had laughed and schemed around behind my back. My hand traced the polished surface, each grain of the wood reminding me I had built all this with my own hands. and I would be the one to tear down everything that no longer deserved to exist in my life. I had no regrets, only sorrow for all the years I wasted loving people who never deserved it. The plan was set, all that remained was the right moment. And while they busied themselves preparing for an extravagant birthday party, I had orchestrated another celebration, one where every dark secret they buried would finally see the light. Vanessa's 40th birthday arrived in a blaze of golden lights. I played the perfect little sister they expected, smiling as I prepared everything flawlessly, as if I knew nothing. Deborah wore her expensive, red dress she reserved for special occasions, pacing the room, adjusting every detail of the table setting, barking orders with her usual controlling tone. "Ela, make sure those crystal glasses are aligned properly, and don't forget to chill the exact champagne Vanessa prefers." I smiled politely, complying like the beautiful shadow they believed me to be. Vanessa entered draped in a glittering dress that hugged a body sculpted by cosmetic surgery and arrogance. Bruce, her husband, followed lazily, carrying a bottle of rare wine as if he were stepping into an auction house. My father, Edward, arrived too. He still carried the calm facade of a retired economics professor. But tonight, in his eyes, I caught a glimpse of something distant. He had no idea he was about to witness a night he would never forget. The party unfolded like all the others before, clinking glasses, hollow congratulations, bragging about achievements I was never invited to be part of. I let them savor the show they thought they owned, unaware they were walking straight into the finale I had written for them. When the clock struck 7 p.m., I stood up and gently tapped the crystal glass. The entire room fell silent. "Before we raise our glasses to celebrate Vanessa's birthday, I'd like to take a few minutes for an important discussion about family and finances," I said, my voice calm but filled with authority. My mother frowned. "Lila, this is the wrong time. This is Vanessa's birthday, not some company meeting." I tilted my head, offering a polite smile. "Then it's the perfect time, isn't it, Mom, since the whole family is here?" I took the tablet from my bag, connecting it to the large screen mounted on the dining room wall, the same wall I had rebuilt myself during the renovation. "Let's get started." I pressed play. My mother and Vanessa's voices echoed throughout the room. My mother's voice was cold. "Let her pay for the house renovation and then we'll cut her out of the will. We can't have a construction worker like her dragging down the family name." Vanessa chimed in, her tone dripping with mockery. "I'll handle all the paperwork. You just need to act convincingly. Ela is so dumb, she'll never know." I stopped the recording, the air became suffocating. All eyes turned toward my mother. Edward looked around, his face filled with disbelief. "What kind of joke is this, Deborah?" I calmly moved to the messages between my mother and Charles Bentley, my father's longtime friend. The sweet words, the plans to run away to Oregon after transferring the assets, the photos of them together at luxurious hotels. Everything was exposed, not a single detail omitted. My father stood frozen, his hands trembling. "Charles," his voice cracked, "my friend, after all these years." Deborah tried to stand, reaching for my hand, but I stepped back, my gaze cold as ice. "Stop pretending, Mom. Dad deserves to know everything, and so do I." Bruce, still trying to maintain his smart lawyer facade, discreetly lowered his head, attempting to delete data from his phone. I pointed directly at him. "Don't bother. Everything's already been backed up." Vanessa, pale as a sheet, whispered, "Lila, what are you doing? Are you trying to destroy this family?" I didn't answer. Instead, I projected the detailed spreadsheet showing every dollar I had poured into the house, $57,450. Every expense had receipts, photos, and witnesses. Suddenly, Edward shot up, shoving his chair back, the wood crashing against the floor. "Deborah, how long? How long have you been mocking me?" Laughing behind my back with Charles. He slammed the dining table, sending the wine bottle and plates crashing onto the tile floor. My mother burst into sobs, fake tears streaming down her heavily painted cheeks. "Edward, let me explain. I was lonely. You were always so busy." But he looked at her with utter disappointment. "Lonely? So you stole from your own daughter? Destroyed this family to chase what? Happiness. Freedom. You lost all of that long ago, Deborah." No one laughed. No one dared speak. Only the suffocating silence remained, heavier than any concrete I had ever mixed. And standing there among the shards, I realized for the first time I was no longer the one being deceived. The house fell into a stillness, like a shattered painting after my father's fury. The crystal shards scattered across the floor. The once lavish party now reduced to a mess of spilled wine and cold food. I stood up, straightened my back, letting my gaze sweep across the faces of those who once called themselves my family. My mother slumped over the armchair, her shoulders shaking. Vanessa cowered behind Bruce, her face drained of color, unable to hide her shock. I didn't need to yell, just simple, firm words. The party is over. I want all of you out of my house. Deborah looked up, her teary eyes staring at me as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Ela, you can't do this. I didn't wait any longer. I quietly opened the front door wide, letting the night breeze sweep away the last remnants of their pretense. From now on, all communication will go through my lawyer. Anyone who crosses that boundary will be served with a restraining order immediately. My father quietly walked out without saying another word. I didn't stop him. He needed time to process everything that had been exposed. Vanessa looked like she wanted to say something, but only shook her head, dragging Bruce out of the house like defeated soldiers. Finally, only Deborah remained, sitting there, clinging to the last remnants of the power she once held. Ela, you're tearing this family apart. You think you can live alone forever? You'll regret this. I didn't answer. I closed the door. The click echoed sharply, closing off an entire outdated chapter of my life. That night, I packed everything that belonged to me. Business files, equipment, childhood photos I still had, and a few pieces of furniture I'd built with my own hands. The rest I left behind for those who had always seen me as nothing more than a tool. Early the next morning, I moved into a high-rise apartment far from the suburbs I once called home. It was smaller but quiet, clean, and most importantly, it was mine. I locked all my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and kept only the line open to my lawyer. I didn't read the first messages from Deborah, but they kept coming, relentless, swinging from anger to begging. Ela, you are cruel. You're destroying this family. Vanessa did nothing wrong. Bruce was just following my orders. Yes, it was my fault, but please give me a chance. I ignored them all. I sent one final cold message. This is my last and final confirmation. All personal communication will cease from now on. Any complaints or legal matters must go directly through my lawyer. I will not accept any more messages, calls, or notes from anyone in this family. And then I blocked them all. A few days later, Vanessa tried to contact me through my company email, attempting to sound sweet. Ela, you're still my sister. Things went too far. Bruce can help you handle any paperwork if you need it. I quietly forwarded that email to my lawyer. The next day, I filed restraining orders against both Bruce and Vanessa. I no longer cared about arguing right or wrong. I didn't need anyone to understand why I was doing this. I had redrawn the boundaries of my life, and this time I wouldn't let anyone cross them. My new apartment had a balcony overlooking the Platte River, the city lights shimmering in the distance. I spent the entire first week cleaning, organizing, and refreshing the space. Like a ritual to purge the old, I rebuilt a small workshop in the living room. The sound of saws and wood shavings was all I needed now. Some nights I stayed up late, sitting at my drafting table, sketching new designs, projects I had abandoned because I was trapped in that endless family loop. I didn't feel satisfied, no sense of victory, only a hollow relief, like finally removing an invisible shackle that had been wrapped around my neck for 36 years. And for the first time, I slept deeply without dreams. 3 weeks after the night of reckoning, I received a call from my father. Edward Morgan had never been one to show emotion easily, but that day, his voice was lower, carrying the weight of a man who had just awakened from a long, bitter sleep. Lila, I need to talk to you. If this is about Mom or Vanessa, I'm not interested, I replied bluntly. No, this is just between you and me. One time only. I hesitated, then agreed. We met at a small coffee shop by Sloan's Lake. Neither of us mentioned what had happened in that house. It wasn't necessary. My father placed a thick folder in front of me. I hired a private attorney to investigate all assets and paperwork signed over the last 10 years. I flipped through the pages, feeling the cold weight of the raw numbers. It's all true. Worse than what you already know. Your mother had been planning to divorce for 2 years. She and Charles intended to sell the vacation house in Jackson Hole that you also helped renovate. I sighed, unsurprised. I no longer expected any decency from those people. Edward sipped his coffee, his eyes reflecting a regret I had never seen before. I can't undo what's happened, Ela. But I want to rewrite the will. That's not necessary, Dad. I don't need anything. He shook his head firmly. No, I need to do this not just for you, but to make amends with myself. I've lived blind for too long now. I want everything to be clear. I will transfer all remaining assets to you. Vanessa and Bruce will be completely cut from the inheritance. I stayed silent, not because I wanted revenge, but because I understood this was the only way to end the toxic cycle that had lasted for years. I wasn't taking everything. I was simply reclaiming what had always been mine. If that's what you want, Dad, I'll let your lawyer work directly with mine. I don't want to be involved any further. Edward nodded. I understand. We sat in silence, neither of us saying anything more. But that silence, it was more comforting than any family conversation I had ever experienced. 3 months passed. I moved permanently into my new apartment, turning it into a space for my own creativity. I expanded my woodworking studio, took on high-end furniture projects for clients in downtown Denver. Work became the medicine that slowly repaired the pieces of my soul worn down over 36 years. I no longer cared what my mother was doing, nor did I bother reading the endless emails from Vanessa filled with shameless justifications. I devoted all my time to my work, to the sketches, to the rough timber that under my hands transformed into furniture with a soul of its own. Each morning I brewed coffee, opened the windows wide to let the sunlight flood my workshop, and breathed in the fresh air I had paid for with my youth. The fake dinners, the condescending remarks from my mother, all of it became a distant memory. Now, no one could command me anymore. And yet, I didn't feel satisfied, nor did I feel the victorious rush portrayed in revenge movies. What I felt was simply quiet, an empty relief, like finally removing an invisible shackle that had been around my neck for far too long. As the days passed, I buried myself in work as a way to mend the fractures my family had left behind. But even in this seemingly free space, there were afternoons when I would look out at the Platte River, feeling a hollow ache that I couldn't quite name. My father Edward seemed to have found his own rhythm of life in Oregon. After selling the big house, he moved to a small seaside town, taking a part-time job teaching economics at a community college. Occasionally, he would call me, of course. Short conversations that never touched on the past, on my mother, on Vanessa or Bruce. We only talked about work, about new construction projects, about good woods for furniture, or sometimes about the pleasant weather where he lived. For the first time in my life, I realized these conversations no longer felt like an obligation, no longer weighed down by pretense. They were natural, light, and I knew, like me, my father was also learning how to live a life no longer chained by the lies that had once trapped both of us. One early autumn day, he sent me a photo, a small wooden house perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. His message was short: if you have a chance, come visit. No pressure, no expectations. I thought about it for a long time before deciding to drive nearly 1,000 miles to get there. When I arrived, Edward was sitting on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, his gaze following the waves crashing against the rocks. "Hello, Ela," he said, unable to hide the relief in his smile. We sat together, not saying much, just quietly watching the sea, letting time drift by gently. Naturally, that evening, he showed me around the little house, proudly pointing out the bookshelves he had built himself, the rustic decorations he'd found at flea markets. "I've been learning woodworking. You probably wouldn't believe it, but I love seeing something take shape under my own hands." I laughed. "No one's ever too old to start over, Dad." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. We didn't need to talk about old mistakes. Both he and I understood that some wounds didn't need to be reopened, just that we needed to move forward more kindly. Back in Denver, everything seemed clearer than ever. I started rebuilding my connections in the construction industry, taking on bigger projects, standing more confidently in front of clients who used to look down on me. I allowed myself to slow down, enjoy quiet dinners, sunny mornings on my balcony filled with lavender. I learned to forgive myself for the years I wasted trying to please people who never truly cared for me. On late nights, I still sat by my drafting table, sketching the buildings I dreamed of. But this time, I no longer rushed to prove myself to anyone. I only wanted to create things that made me happy, that made me feel free. Edward occasionally sent me samples of wood he crafted himself. I hung them in my workshop as reminders that some bonds, though once broken, could be repaired, if both sides were willing to let go of the past. On those late nights in my new apartment, the city lights shimmered like a silk ribbon beyond the wide glass window. In the small workshop I had set up, the smell of wood, fresh paint, and the sound of pencils scratching across paper were my only companions. I no longer drew just to complete contracts for clients. These new designs were bolder, even wilder than any commercial project I had ever taken on. They were spaces I wanted to build for myself. A small wooden house in the Oregon woods, a studio on the top floor overlooking the Washington coast, even a mobile cabin I could take across America. I allowed myself to dream of things I once denied myself, once thought extravagant or pointless. Perhaps because now I knew I was building a life entirely on my terms. No Vanessa to judge me, no Deborah to mock me, and no one left to exploit me. I had paid too much for this freedom and I would never let it slip away again. On weekends, I often wandered the neighborhood, exploring old wood shops, vintage bookstores, and hidden cafes. I started talking to shop owners, local artisans. Some of their stories made me realize there were others out there trying to rebuild their lives from ruins too. Imperfect lives, but far more authentic than any picture-perfect family portrait my mother ever tried to stage. One late evening while finishing a sketch for my dream mobile cabin, my father sent me a message with a picture of a dining table he had made himself. No ornate carvings, just the raw grain of wood, sturdy and solid. I want to give you this table for your new workshop. There's no better gift than something we built together. I smiled, replying, I'll save the most honorable spot for it. We no longer needed many words to understand each other. Those were small but sturdy threads helping me and him reconnect a once fractured bond. No efforts to make amends, no demands for forgiveness, just walking parallel paths, free but together. Whenever I sat at my drafting table, I asked myself, if there was no one left to please, no one to prove anything to, how would I choose to build my life? The answer came easier than I expected. I would build it the way I built the projects I loved most. Solid, honest, with room for flaws and always space for surprises. I began laying out a real plan for my mobile cabin project. No more dreaming. I started sourcing materials, calculating costs, scheduling each phase of construction. I wanted to complete every detail with my own hands as a ritual to mark the beginning of a new chapter. On quiet evenings, I spread the blueprints across the floor, marking every note in red. Every line, every corner was a declaration that I was shaping my future, one where I no longer needed anyone's approval. Each morning I woke up in my sun-drenched apartment, feeling my heartbeat sync with this new rhythm of life. No rushing, no forcing myself to fit the world's expectations. I knew there would still be lonely days, hollow spaces no one could fill. That I accepted because that's the price of true freedom. Layla's story isn't just about reclaiming what was hers. It's a lesson in letting go of toxic bonds to build a life of freedom and authenticity. She never sought revenge or triumph, only chose to face the past with calm and dignity. In the real world, sometimes the most valuable freedom comes from daring to set boundaries, to live life on your own terms, even if it means embracing solitude. But it's a solitude filled with peace and pride.